An aviapreneur is someone who believes in their visions of their industry before seeing it as a reality. Welcome to a new episode of AVIAPRENEURS podcast. This is Adnan Branbo, and allow me to welcome my guest for today, the CEO of AvioWiki and the Vice Chair of the Tech Committee of the EBAA, the European Business Aviation Association, Mr. Diego Magrini. Good day, Diego.
Morning, Adnan. Good morning. How are you doing?
Perfect. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. Diego, let's go ahead directly to the topic. Automating the entire aviation industry, revolutionizing aviation data. What a bold statement. What a brave mission you have set for yourself and your team. Why do you think you can do that?
Well, it's always been in my past the thought of if you want to change something, you need to know something. And when I've been working for a while in aviation, in business aviation, I realized that processes and data sources were all very manual, very much built for human consumption, for someone reading something, the yellow pages concept. And with a bit of background in technology, I was totally shocked by this. And you say, well, I think this can be done better. And I've searched very hard for a long time for someone that was trying to crack this problem, and I haven't found them. And so at some point, you just decide to go and do it. Why I think we can do it? I think we can go from 0 to 1, and that's the very first important step. 0 being the situation where everyone is using the yellow pages, and 1 where we at least start to enable some automation by providing digital data. The concept is you cannot automate an industry until you digitized it. And we see a lot of flashy videos about vehicles flying themselves and flying passengers without a pilot. And there is this whole new revolution coming up of urban air mobility, advanced air mobility. All those promises cannot be fulfilled without a digital environment for these devices to work and make sense of what's surrounding them. So I think it's a very sweet spot in terms of timing and maturity of the industry and need, because these things will be needed very soon.
Correct. But at the same time, don't you agree with me that it's very weird that the aviation industry, which is very advanced in the aircraft technology, in the airport technology, and the air traffic control, is taking so much time to cope with the technological revolution we are experiencing and living in every aspect of our life? Why do you think it's taking so much time for the way how business is conducted in the aviation industry to follow this revolution?
Well, yes, it is weird because you go on board an aircraft, you see a lot of screens, and the new avionics always add more screens, more touch, more. In aviation, there's always a bit of reluctance to new things, and it's always. I always remember this story from a maintenance fellow that was saying, the in-flight entertainment system uses a 2 gigabyte hard drive, and it's this big. So what? Like, we have SSD, SD cards, and yeah, but that was certified, and that's what we have to use. And to change that, it costs 10, 15 grand. So the certification and the safety processes of aviation have always slowed down the introduction of technology. There's always a very long process. Agile methods that are used in software are very difficult to apply to certified instruments or technologies. And so the software behind all of these has always kind of lagged, right? So data onto an FMS is still many times loaded by floppy disk. So to such a low bar, how can you go and say, well, this thing is going to fly automatically? And I think that's all the legacy that we are carrying from the 40s and onwards. The NOTAM system, not being able to put an @ in an email address when you publish a NOTAM and you want to have an email address. And so the bar has always been very, very low. And the airline industry is not too concerned about these things because they fly very regularly. Or better, I should say, they were not too concerned until 2020 when things started going havoc, and your usual Frankfurt to Heathrow schedule was all of a sudden a mess because you had, the Austrian passenger that have been in Italy 2 days ago and then traveled to Switzerland and now needs to enter the UK. Oh my God, can they do it? Cannot. So all of those information were all transacted in text, and that's why check-in times were made longer. And so there was all of a sudden in 2020 a realization that we actually need more digital infrastructure. But before that, the things were quite regular, at least for the airline industry. And the business aviation industry, well, general aviation, it's a given. It's still paper plotting, or at least it was until not long ago. But you go around with a paper chart, and business aviation has always been very close because there is this concept that data gives away information about my customers. If I put in a database what's the wingspan of my aircraft, or if my aircraft have winglets or not, or if I need an air stair, then everyone can see that and they can figure out what are the capabilities of these aircraft. And no, we don't want that. And so there's always been a closure to sharing data. So I think it's a mix of legacy that has been carried on by the safety mentality, which I don't necessarily challenge, but there's certainly improvements that can be done in certification processes and that are coming with more technology company getting involved in aviation. And then not really a big push from the industry. Airlines didn't need anything too advanced. Business aviation has always been reluctant to share data and to have common data goals or common technology goals, and so it was always a bit stiff, let's say.
It's a very nice preview of the current status of how the business and how the work is done in the aviation industry. How do you think, and what's your plan for AvioWiki to change the current status?
Well, the fact of having digital data readily available for anything in aviation, we're talking about airports, we're talking about providers that offer services, FBOs, fuel, airspace, enables already our customers to build some intelligent function in their software. So it reduces the workload or at a human level already. So with the same persons using the same processes, but when you enter a city pair and you can immediately tell the customer, well, there might be issues because of opening hours or because of the capability of the aircraft as compared to the runway or the FAR category. Already a salesperson that perhaps doesn't have all the operational insight can give a better service. So in the short term, it will be a significant improvement of what at least the non-scheduled flights can offer to their customers. We can have smarter booking forms on websites that don't allow you to file send a request for, I say, Cambridge in the middle of the night or Geneva in the middle of the night because we already know that the airport is closed. So a better service ultimately to the passenger, which is what I think everyone is aiming for. But if we look at perhaps 5 years time, something like that, where we will need to enable machines to fly on their own and to make sense of certain things, I think that's where the real sweet spot will be. So machines being able to know if a certain charging station is available live, like a Tesla car already does nowadays, right? So we're not talking super futuristic things. We're just talking about digitizing those information. Will I be able to get the fuel I need? Will I be able to park there? How much will it cost me to park? And so all of these information will then be consumed by software almost entirely, and that automation industry can really kick off.
Frankly, it's very quite interesting and exciting development you're bringing to the industry.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of services that can be built on top of this. So the usual frustrations of following up the manual processes, even in simple things like arranging handling. Why do I need to send an email with all the details for someone to receive that email, copy those details into their system? And then perhaps this is a trip support company, so they will do exactly the same process with ultimate handler, right? So they will send an email to the handler, exporting data from their system to yet another non-machine readable solution, and then eventually the FPO, the final receiver, will do the same. They will take all those information in that request and put it into their system. So
a lot of
I definitely see. Yeah, I definitely see a lot of space for all of this to happen digitally.
But looking at your career, you started studying to be a pilot. You worked as a cabin crew for EasyJet. You worked in dispatch, in operations, and then suddenly in technology and software. None of these jobs originally involved technology, pure technology and software. So how did you make that move?
Right. So technology and software in general was always something that was in my toolbox, and I trace it back to when I was around 11 years old. Probably not the easiest kid to manage in the school, and my math teacher then realized that I had certain interest and approach with technology and computers. We had a computer in the room at the time, Windows 3.1, and before that DOS. So those years, and he presented me with a book of the programming language BASIC, which was very basic, but I still have that book. I kept it so for so long. And that's when I really started to getting interest in software and realizing that, wow, this is like the material world on steroids. Like, you can really do whatever you want. You just need to know how. And so through the years, for the following 20 and more years, I just always fiddle one way or another with software. And when I was seeing something that didn't look right to me, I was always trying to build the MVP of what would it be if I wanted to make it great. And so when I started working in business aviation, actually already in EasyJet, I proposed the very first EFB for cabin crew, and when I brought it to the managers in Luton, they were just like, how did you make this? Because it was integrating with the EasyJet system. They were using AIMS. It was downloading the schedule for. You don't have an interface to this. No, we just scrape the page that we see every day, and it seemed easy enough. So I built it in PHP, like super lame stuff. My programmers today would probably laugh at that, but it worked, and it made that wow moment. And so it's always been something that was there, and I think there's a lot. As I said, when you leave, you find the problems, and if you leave the problem, you probably also can imagine the solution. And the technology was just, for me, the tool to put that solution in place, or to build an MVP of that solution. And so yeah, I just went on like this, and as I was encountering problems, I was trying to solve them with software, with technology, until I ended up in the beautiful world of business aviation. where the problem was sizable enough, and I worked long enough to try take a shot at it.
So you always had passion and you always had understanding of how the software and technology actually works. But for someone who's an aviator, who's a professional in business aviation, do you think they still have an opportunity to establish a startup which with technology and software background to disrupt some kind of aspect in the aviation or the business aviation industry? Or do they need to actually have a qualification in technology and software to make it happen?
I certainly don't need it. Qualification is needed, and that's not just technology. Most things, history tell us that the self-learners have created such important and beautiful things that it would be a limitation to say that you need a qualification or formal education in a certain field to revolutionize it. And I certainly think that we are nowadays so much used to technology that even someone that doesn't know how to write a line of code can imagine the solution. And for me, it's always been about translating the requirements. That's a very important thing, a very important tool. I think someone who wants to start an enterprise in technology need to be aware of. You need to have that capacity of telling your development team how this thing needs to work. And many times is keeping into consideration the edge cases. So I think a lot of times, if you have that tool, that capacity of taking an operational requirement and transforming it into a technology requirement, then certainly, I mean, most of my job at the moment in AvioWiki is right. We want to write a digital model of a hangar. Okay, so I know what a hangar looks like. I know what I want when I book a hangar, but how do we translate this into a database of hangars, right? So what fields do we need, and how those fields need to be coded? Because do I want to know what is the actual floor? How big is the actual floor, or do I want to know how big is the total space, including office space? So translating the requirements from real life into technology is probably the biggest part of a technology startup.
And how is industry reacting to AvioWiki? Are they accepting these initiatives and these developments you're bringing, or is there a resistance to change?
It's generally seen as very interesting, and I think the real shakeup was COVID, because before, everyone who looked at AvioWiki and the fact that digitization and all of that, saying, yeah, that's great, but our software is not there yet. So anyways, we will show this information on the screen, and for that, we can use what we already have, which we know it might not be as good as you, even for data, but we know it. So there is this resistance to change indeed in the business aviation industry because of the level of service that people want to give to their customers. And what if I change and screw up? And that's always a very big big thought. Yeah, and but COVID, I think, has really exposed that more can be done with less, and definitely should, because otherwise your whole business structure is very reliant on how many bodies can you throw at a problem, and sometimes this is not a good approach. And so automating things that are boring to do manually. I mean, I think people should strive to do only the fun things, right? Not the boring things. So
Sure.
automating checking entry requirements and checking vaccinations and checking the travel history, even the opening hours of an airport. People are starting to relate to these concepts of automation now that there were less resources, especially in the pickup, right? More flights, still with less resources because you still haven't hired anyone back and you're still reluctant, you're still recovering financially. So I think this has really changed the approach, and bringing examples from the pandemic really make people relate to this concept of automation with digital data.
I like how you view COVID as a disruptor rather than destroyer.
Well, we have to make the best out of it. It's something that no one had planned for. It's obviously it obviously put a lot of businesses and people in tragic situations, and I know many of those stories. But without forgetting, we have to start recovering, and so I think it gave us a lot of very good examples of how things can be done differently and better. It's even just the fact that today I'm speaking from my home and not from an office, it already speaks for itself, right?
Absolutely.
I probably would have had a video room with a lot of decorations and stuff like that, but it's becoming normal to break those barriers almost, right? Sometimes I have calls with clients and the kids are running around here, and that's life. Like,
Indeed.
Why have we been hiding it? It's nothing to be ashamed of, right? So there's definitely been good in what was the result of the pandemic.
I really like the decoration of your house and all these greeneries.
I cannot take any credit for that.
They are amazing. So let's talk about financing. What about it? Is AvioWiki bootstrapped, or did you rely on outside financing? And with the resistance and not easy adoption of the technologies you are bringing, is the finance world ready and prepared to finance aviation startups?
So if there's one thing I learned about financing a startup when I was looking seriously at funds, is that investors want to be invested. And one of the investors here in Cambridge wrote a book, The Invested Investor. The point is they want to know the industry. They want to be comfortable in what they are investing into. And sometimes they may even sound picky or pretentious by saying, well, we only take, I don't know, B2C customers with the objective of reaching 4 million per year, blah, blah, blah. So they have all these tight constraints. And that's just because they need to understand it. And that's mostly angel investors, which, for what used to be a one-man show, it was my go-to. I think bootstrapping is a very good alternative that everyone should try. It does put a lot of pressure on personal finances and on family stress and all of that, but it's definitely worth doing it because you really get a sense of how things are going, and that's a very important in the beginning. Aviation, even if we are a full software company, as soon as you say aviation, you start ringing alarms at all places, and that's with finance, that's with insurance, that's with a lot of business aspects, and even if you then specify, I'm not going to put people into flying things, no one's going to die, it's still aviation. And so there are a lot of hurdles just because you get that aviation label. Yes.
Yes, I fully agree with you. And I had so many aviapreneurs talking to me before, and they all had the same experiences. It's not an easy industry to finance, actually.
No, not to finance and not to get a lot of services for. Even very simple things like accepting credit card payments. There are a lot of exclusions that just say aviation, and you're left wondering why.
Yes. So let's go to EBAA. You're currently the vice chair of the TIC committee there. What make you take that role, working for a non-for-profit organization? And what job are you doing there to serve the automation of the aviation industry?
So, EBAA is probably the second largest organization that brings together business aviation companies, and I think it's important to participate in this aggregators, let's say, because as I was saying, we need to break this reluctancy barrier to sharing knowledge, sharing insights, and there's group that have managed. You probably know the Ops group, where basically from the bottom they managed to break the barrier of and the shame of sharing things. So you have pilots and dispatcher sharing information. I think the EBAA should work, and MBAA and all the other associations should do almost the same, but working from the top. So trying to convince the managers, convince the organization themselves, and eventually the regulator and authorities to enter into more of a sharing. Just recently, I think, just recently there was this announcement from the European Union that the companies, operators will need to start checking visa requirements against an electronic system, right? And this information, I think, would have been a great, a great story for the EBA and the tech committee to start working with the commission and with LISA to look at how this will be implemented in business aviation, because clearly we have a completely different structure than airlines, and we also need to make the regulators aware of this. The regulation about this reporting was written very poorly. You cannot even understand if it applies to private flights or to commercial flights, because air carriers is not defined in the regulation. So this whole top to bottom job need to happen somewhere, and I think having a strong association which has active committees such as the tech committee and all the others just gives the industry strength, and show that if we are together, hopefully we can reach something better for everyone. So at the moment, the tech committee is working on a standardization project, where we are defining how software companies, or in general, how software talk to each other. So if you want to build an API to exchange passenger information with an FBO system, once this job is done, you will be able to refer to the EBAA standardization project, and the documentation will be available. You can just say, my API is compliant with the EBAA API standardization, and that's how I publish the information through my API, which makes it very easy on the receiving end to just say, well, great, because there's another 50 companies that use the same structure, so I don't need to rewrite the whole thing again. And then when the commission will come with yet another rule of send us passenger details before the flight because we need to check this and that, well, the airlines will go and say, oh yes, let's do this via CETA or AFTN and this PAX EDIFACT. But wait a second, we cannot exchange health certificates via EDIFACT because it was written in the 80s, and we can, it's a lot more difficult to do it via an API and blah blah blah. The EBAA can just go and say, this is a very modern infrastructure, was built in 2022, was written in 2022, and why don't you consider also accepting information in this format, which is very friendly for the general and business aviation companies, and software already know how to work with this. And so that's what's going on at the moment, and I think it's a very good project to showcase collaboration, because we can take the know-how of a lot of companies that work in handling, that work in charter sales, that work in EAPs, data transmission, scheduling software, flight planning software. They can all pitch in with their little niche, and I think that's the important thing to understand. Is an industry is built of many niches. There's those that track the maintenance parts to the exact location in the warehouse, and there's those that make the airplanes fly by filing a flight plan, and all of these niches coming together. That's what builds the industry, and eventually what builds the associations.
Indeed, I really like this strategy of, as a startup and as a private company, it's not easy to talk to the government and to the regulator. Being involved in an industry association, non-for-profit industry association, make this dialogue easier and more productive.
Absolutely.
So it's amazing strategy. Other than this strategy, what recommendations can you give to the listeners of the podcast you think they can follow, so say they can launch more technological based and software based aviation startups that can improve this industry and make it easier, faster, more cost effective? What recommendations and lessons have you learned and you think they can follow to make their life easier and their businesses more successful?
I definitely, life easier is the key here, because there's so many stresses, as we already outlined, that you really want that make your life easy part. And I think the underlying concept should always be build something small and grow it from there, which follows the launched is better than perfect concept, which if you don't take your idea out there, no one is going to see it. No one is going to give you feedback, whether that's good or bad. It's always good, and you're never going to know how to adjust. So a lot of companies have failed because they spent a lot of money into creating this thing and keeping it under a veil until it was perfect. And keeping secrecy about what they are doing, NDAs and all of that. Well, if you were faster to market by being more open, you could probably save money, start to generate some revenue by selling little parts, and then grow your product together with your revenue. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I would recommend to everyone. Just get it out there, put it in the hands of people, and see what they say. If they all say it's crap, then you probably need to adjust something. But if you have a bit of encouragement from certain sides, follow those. Take the feedback, take the negative feedback, take the positive feedback. Don't be very precious about it. It's all. You could also be wrong, and I have been many times.
I really like this piece of advice, because I always listen to people telling me or telling others, hide your ideas, make sure nobody listen to it. In my point of view, always it has been, if it's my idea, it's very hard for me to make it a successful business. So how about I listen to an idea of someone else and make it a business? It's almost impossible.
Exactly.
Taking an idea and making it a creation, a business, require a lot of passion, of belief and vision. So it's not easy for anyone who listens to any idea to make it a business. So don't be fearful. Just go ahead and share it. I fully
you totally nailed it. Yeah.
Before we close, I have a question. You worked for some of the most prestigious private jet operators in the world, VistaJet, Executive Aviation Group, and Jet Concierge Club. You worked in dispatch and in ground operation. And I'm sure you have experienced some weird situations, some challenging situations, some funny and interesting stories. Can you share one or two with the listeners?
Obviously this is an industry of stories, right? When we meet at the pubs, we always spend hours telling each other the quirks. And one or interesting moment, let's say, was for me almost the realization that at the end of the day, even the most quirky, owner of the most expensive jet just want to go about his business, and for him, using the airplane is the same as for me using a taxi or a train, and so once I just had to take which was very rare, to take a call directly from the owner of this top account, and very nervous situation, because you hear stories about these people and all of that, and it was just the most natural conversation I could have ever had with a person, and I think that's what a lot of people miss in this. And I had a lot of colleagues and that were super scared of talking to these people, and so I would easily take the call. But rich people are just other people with more money. It doesn't change the fundamental fact. So I think with all the stories of that person that cannot fly on an airplane, that doesn't have certain type of cutleries made of certain material to eat that certain food that he always want, or those that always want their slippers at the entrance and their iPhone cable already connected to the table, and all those quirks. At the end of the day, it's just people, and many times they are there's an aura of stories and myth built around them. But I think we should open the customers more, or let people be more exposed to the customers, and you will build a rapport. When you screw up, they will understand. That was the best. In my case, is when you make a mistake, you just openly say, this time, and he will understand. They will understand. It's 2% of the cases. The other times, you always make an amazing job, and just have an honest conversation. And so, not really a specific story. Sorry, I've heard
very valuable advice.
Yeah, I heard a lot of those, and as much as I like to exchange these kind of stories, I also think that sometimes they build this image of our customers that is a bit detrimental to how then we serve them. So that's my take on that.
Thank you, Diego. I appreciate your time, your advice, and your experience.
Thank you, Adnan. It was a very pleasant conversation.
The pleasure is all ours, and I'm sure it's the same pleasure for all the listeners of AVIAPRENEURS podcast. Thank you very much for joining me and Diego today. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a new episode of AVIAPRENEURS podcast. Have a great day.